The first game for this episode was already mentioned in the context of the Demo 1 disc in the first PlayStation 1 episode for my Nostalgia Trip games. Loaded from Gremlin Interactive was one of the games on the disc that I used to revisit every now and then, although I never could get particularly far in it. Nor could I ever bother to try and get much further when I had the chance to play it, even though it's always nostalgic to have a brief go at it. The thing is, Loaded is a bit too repetitive and stuck in its rut to be enjoyable for longer than maybe 15 minutes. As it is a three-dimensional fixed-view third-person shooter with not very pleasing graphics in even that day standards, the excessive blood and gore and crude humor don't really lift the experience enough to make it worth trudging through the insanely long maze-like levels, unless you have a friend to play with who's good at it. Playing Loaded in single-player mode is just a massive chore, to put it nicely. Still, those of you who had the Demo 1 disc back in the day, you'll remember Loaded with some fondness. Skip a few years forward and I found myself in the midst of music studies. My new gaming friends were pretty much divided into two camps, PC gamers and PlayStation gamers, and the game most PlayStation gamers were hyping about the most was Gran Turismo 2, which I studied for a while and decided that I'm gonna have to buy myself a PlayStation as well, even though I was a firm PC gamer at the time. Mind you, I still am. But Gran Turismo 2 was something that PC gamers were jealous of. Just to give the few you uninitiated ones something to chew on, the first Gran Turismo gave us a racing school to learn racing skills, which opened up driver's licenses to access new events, tracks, cars and championships. Winning races would earn you money to buy new cars to race and tune up. The first Gran Turismo featured 140 cars and 11 racetracks, some of which were imaginary ones, but have become just as memorable to Gran Turismo players as any real racing circuit in a virtual environment. There was also an arcade mode to do some light racing, mostly aimed at playing against your friends, but the real meat of the game was the simulation mode. Gran Turismo 2 couldn't be called much more than an upgrade on the same formula, but what an upgrade it was. Almost 650 cars, 27 racing tracks, now including a few rally tracks, and a much more comfortable user interface. Also, some of the physics were improved, the method of getting to race events was made a bit different, and the graphics and sounds were also slightly improved from the original Gran Turismo. Oddly enough, my absolute favorite thing about Gran Turismo 2 was the jazzy menu tune, and it still takes me back to those few months in 2001 and 2. Another early PlayStation classic for the list is another obvious one. Resident Evil. In my case, though, the reasons for its inclusion here might not be quite as obvious. The horror elements in Resident Evil didn't really get my attention in the way it was perhaps supposed to, because the full motion video intro completely erased all possibilities for me to take the game seriously.
Jill Valentine, Barry Burton, Rebecca Chambers, Albert Wesker, Resident Evil.
Although this was 1996, where you couldn't expect high standards in acting and directing, suspense and action, the intro sequence made the game more comedic to me than anything. And then you get to the game itself, which is a slight upgrade of Alone in the Dark, a classic French survival horror adventure from 1992, which will probably end up in one of the DOS episodes later on. The problem I have with how Resident Evil plays is the dialogue is clumsy, slow and unskippable, just like you would expect from a Japanese role-playing game. The odd camera angles are annoying at first, but they do enhance the suspense in the experience. The carrying capacity of only a handful of items at a time is also a bit irritating, but it could be argued that it adds a touch of realism to the gameplay. When I first played Resident Evil about 25 years ago, I was underwhelmed, disappointed, and baffled by what the big deal with the game was, but I also didn't get all that far in it. Now, 25 years later, I have bought it into my PS1 collection, given it more time than I ever anticipated, and learned to appreciate the game for what it was and how it evolved the survival horror adventure genre. While it certainly is an important game and worth checking out if you've missed out on it so far, I wouldn't recommend the original to any newcomers. Instead, dig out the remake, which was originally released as a GameCube exclusive in 2002, but has since been made available for Nintendo Wii and Switch, PlayStation 2 and 3, Xbox 360 and Steam. Next up, we have some pirate-themed arcade action. Overboard from Psygnosis. I have my cousin to thank for introducing me to this game, which happened sometime during late 97, early 98 maybe. At a time when 90% of my experiences with the original PlayStation were racing games and martial arts games, mostly Colin McRae and Tekken, anything different was considered an improvement. Not all such games managed to keep interest for long, but Overboard proved to be interesting enough to eventually buy into my collection. You control a small pirate ship around maze-like areas that don't seem to have any connection to the real world, unlike Sid Meier's Pirates for one, but being an arcade action game, the vastly imaginary areas work well enough. The idea is to shoot all enemy ships and structures that you're able to, open gates, collect weapons and other items, shoot some more stuff, and eventually reach the end of each level, which is like an underwater wormhole to the next level. Pretty sci-fi, but in an arcade-like context, all these little things matter very little as long as it's fun and playable. And Overboard is playable as any of the better-known games that I've ever played on PS1, perhaps more so than some. From a retro gamer's perspective, the levels in Overboard are a bit overlong, since it takes around 10 minutes to clear even the earliest levels on a good run. But that's the late 90s for you. Everything had to be massive in every possible way. Although Overboard isn't a game I play all that often, it's always an enjoyable experience, and it's definitely one of those games that brings a certain long gone time in my life. If that's not nostalgia gaming, I don't know what is. Now, I'm pretty sure this last game for this episode will give my channel some copyright notices if none of the other games in this episode do, because we're gonna end this episode with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. Punk rock and hip hop were, and still are, a large part of the skating culture. And pretty much all extreme sports things, so it's only natural that any extreme sport game has a soundtrack filled with music connected to that culture. For Tony Hawk skateboarding games, you get everything from Faith No More to Dead Kennedys, Public Enemy to Rage Against the Machine, AC/DC to Run DMC, and a whole bunch of lesser known bands that were probably closely related to the skateboarding scene. My introduction to extreme sports games came through Dave Mirra Freestyle BMX, which I thought was epic, because I was always a fan of BMX. Skateboarding was a natural extension of that interest, so Tony Hawk Skateboarding and Grind Session were very welcome games into the genre. But the most time I ever spent with any of these games was definitely the second in the original Tony Hawk series, and it's the only one I still play every now and then. Somehow the level designs just feel spot on throughout the game, compared to all the other games in the series. The playability is what I've grown used to, the soundtrack is etched into my mind, and perhaps still more importantly, it's a game I used to play with my friends back in the day, and I even played it on my PC a lot. But the way these games are played, they have PlayStation written all over them.